Greetings everyone, welcome to the third episode of Bring On the Bad Guys, the show where we take a look at some of the most nefarious villains in Marvel history. Today we're looking at villains that primarily fight against Prince Namor, the Submariner. And our past couple episodes we have usually focused on one decade, because Prince Namor's rogues gallery isn't quite as extensive as, let's say, the Fantastic Four's. We are going to just go ahead and incorporate everybody that Namor has faced in his own series, and also in Tales to Astonish, which was the other series that he headlined in the 60s, and also some pre-Marvel characters and the like. And we're also going to go a little bit into the 70s as his series extended and ended in the early 70s. So, buckle up. Here are the top 10 villains that debuted against Prince Namor, the Submariner, in the 1960s, 70s, and also in the pre-Marvel Comics days. We're going to kick it right in to number 10. And number 10 is a man called Destiny. And in typical early Marvel fashion, Paul Destin, or Destiny if you want to pronounce it that way, was a early influence of Prince Namor, and actually was one of the crew on the ship that Namor's father captained, named the Oracle, to Antarctica, and that voyage ended in Captain Leonard Mackenzie meeting Princess Fen, who is Prince Namor's eventual mother. And so that was the meeting between mom and dad, as far as Namor is concerned. And Paul Destiny wandered off and went exploring on his own, accidentally triggered an avalanche on the Antarctic continent, and discovered something he called the Helmet of Power. It was actually the legendary serpent crown encased in a metal protective casing. And what this crown did was it amplified Paul's natural mental telepathy. And he ended up fighting Prince Namor, wiped out the Submariner's mind, and is responsible for Namor being stuck with no memory in New York City until the Human Torch discovered him in the early 1960s. Years later, Namor would run into Paul again, and this time Namor is the one that caused the accidental avalanche. Paul escaped on his own, tried to run for president, and ended up actually having a mental breakdown and passing away. So he didn't stick around too long, but very influential as far as influence on Namor's past and future. His first appearance was in Tales to Astonish 101 in March 1968. He was born in Kansas City, Missouri, in the good old USA, created by Archie Goodwin and Gentleman Gene Colan. Personality 2, powers 2, as he is a natural telepath, but most of his significant power actually comes from wearing the helmet / serpent crown. Mythology 3, just because of his influence on Namor's personal history. Design 2, the helmet actually looks pretty ugly on him, and other than that, he's just kind of a typical human being. Cultural impact 2, he has never been outside the pages of the comics. Going on to number 9, the U-Man. So, as we know, German U-boats were underwater boats, so the U-Man is an underwater man. And he actually appeared way back in Submariner Comics 35, way back in 1954. And he appeared as a child, and he played games with Namor growing up. When Morano, which is his actual name, grew up, instead of tending to side with the US and Britain and the Allied powers, the U-Man decided to side with Nazi Germany, as you can tell by his swastika belt there, and went up against the Invaders. So the Invaders magazine debuted in the mid-70s, and it filled in the gaps that were left more so because the comics in World War II with Captain America and the original Human Torch and Prince Namor, the continuity wasn't as much of a goal as it became when Stan Lee took over at Marvel Comics. So the Invaders comics focused on telling stories of World War II, where Captain America and Namor and Bucky and Toro and the original Human Torch all fought against the Nazis and other World War II foes. And so that's where the U-Man came in. He was one of the secret weapons for the Axis powers, where of course he could go underwater and give them a fighting chance against Namor and his underwater legions. Of course, his origin is in Atlantis, created by Bill Everett, who also created Prince Namor. Personality and powers both sitting at 3. Mythology 2. Doesn't have a lot of story to go on aside from his mid-70s adventures against the invaders, although there are some occasional stories where he's shown up since. Design is 2, primarily because of the wonderful swastika on his belt and also kind of a corny mask. Cultural impact 1, in that he has not appeared on the pages or outside the pages of comics. Moving to number 8, we have LYRA. And LYRA is once again appearing on this list, much like Destiny, in that she had some very significant impact, a very significant impact on Prince Namor's life. So she first appeared in Submariner number 32 in December of 1970. She was originally from Hawaii, and as she grew up, she discovered her heritage, which was part Lemurian. And if you're not familiar with Lemuria, it is another undersea kingdom, much like Atlantis. And around the late 60s, early 70s, Namor was having more adventures involving both the Serpent Crown, which we mentioned when we talked about Destiny, and Lemuria. And LYRA went and overthrew the Emperor of Lemuria, put herself in charge, and in essence lured Namor to her country, where she captured him, as you can see from this picture, and eventually led Tiger Shark to forcing the death of Prince Namor's father. So she definitely not well liked by Prince Namor. She also kidnapped the Lady Dorma, who is Namor's primary love interest, and ended up killing her. So she has, in essence, 2 murders on her hands of Namor's closest family and friends, and that makes it so that she's not incredibly influential outside Namor's world, but very much influential within the prince's life, and very much hated by Prince Namor. She was created by Roy Thomas and Sal Buscema. Her personality, 2, again, she is more bent on power. Not, I wouldn't say one-dimensional, but very much focused on just attaining power. Her powers are 3. Mythology 3, and again, that she was responsible for 2 very significant deaths. Design 2, cultural impact 1, again, she has not appeared outside the comics. These days, she's more of a serpentine figure, as she has been serving the old god Set. And Set wouldn't show up in the main Marvel Universe until the mid-70s, but the Serpent Crown is a relic of his, and he would appear in some Conan the Barbarian comics leading up to that point. Now we go to number 7, who is Samuel Smithers, aka PLANTMAN. Very often in the early Marvel days, the writers would find a noun, slap it in front of the word man or woman, and that would be the villain. And PLANTMAN is one of those characters. He debuted in Strange Tales 113 in October 1963. He was originally from London, England, and he worked as a gardener, and he worked with some experimental technology that led to him having the ability to communicate with plants. So much like Swamp Thing, actually probably even more like the Floronic Man from DC Comics. And in his early days, he had a standard, cloth material costume, and later on he appeared, as you see him in this picture here, encased in actual plant armor and becoming more of one with the plant. He was created by Stan Lee, Jerry Siegel, and Dick Ayers. Personality 2, Powers 3, Mythology 2, Design 3, and Cultural Impact 2. He did appear in one episode of the Kids Marvel Superhero Squad, and that's about it for the Plant Man. As you can probably tell, he fights most of his battles using manipulation and mind control of plant matter, and in more recent days he's preferred to go by Blackheath. Moving up to number 6, we get back to some more undersea enemies as we look at Prince BYRRAH. And Prince BYRRAH's first appearance was back in August 1954 in Submariner Comics 35, and he actually appeared with the U-Man and Namor as children out playing, and as they were playing, Prince Namor, who was not aware at this point that he could breathe out of water for an extended period of time, was trapped on a sheet of ice. Originally, Prince BYRRAH refused to tell anyone what happened. He eventually did tell Namor's mother what happened, and they sent out a rescue team, and that is when Prince Namor discovered that he could actually live above water for an indefinite amount of time, as opposed to his fellow Atlanteans. BYRRAH is known for being jealous of Prince Namor and for wanting the throne, as you're going to see quite a few of these top villains. That was the case. And in one of Prince Namor's many forays to the surface world, Prince BYRRAH took over the throne, and of course Namor had to come back, kick him out, and tell him to get his act together in prison. He hasn't really been around too much after the 1960s, although he did appear in the Marvel video game Ultimate Alliance. He was a mini-boss, and he appeared in the 60s Marvel Superheroes animated TV show. And he even has more recently given up his evil ways and went on to help Prince Namor with keeping the throne away from Namor's other chief rivals. Now we go to Dr. Lemuel Dorcas. And aside from the unfortunate name, Dr. Dorcas is actually a very interesting character. I think it would be an interesting take to see him on the big screen as more of a psychological villain. He is a genius doctor and geneticist who first appeared in the Submariner number 5 in September 1968. He's a United States-based doctor that pioneered work in splicing human and Atlantean DNA as well as DNA of underwater creatures. So he is responsible for the creation of Tiger Shark and Orca, who you will see later on in this list, as well as Piranha and some other creepy underwater villains. He even at one point experimented on himself, and that involved splicing starfish DNA, and the result there was not pleasant to look at. So Dr. Dorcas, a very creepy villain. There were some creepier pictures I actually could have chosen, but I decided that we'll just go with this particular image. And he's very much a behind the scenes type of villain, where he prefers to set up his team and send them out to battle Prince Namor and his allies. His personality we have sitting at 3, powers 2, mythology 3, again primarily because he has created so many of the prince's primary villains. Cultural impact 2, he has not appeared outside the comics. And design 2, he has had some pretty ugly incarnations as a starfish man per se. Moving up to number 4, we have the brutal Orka, another classic comic book trope, as it is just slightly altering the spelling of a noun and making that into the ideally more menacing sounding name. Orka is an Atlantean, so he's from Atlantis. He first appeared in March 1970 in Submariner 23, and he was created by Roy Thomas and Marie Severin. His power scale, we're looking at a personality of 1, kind of like the Ocean's version of Rhino, not a very smart cookie. Powers 4, and he's even stronger than a normal Atlantean, and he also can communicate with underwater creatures such as killer whales, and that is something that not all undersea dwellers in the Marvel Universe have access to. Mythology 3, he's been a part of Heroes for Hire. He had some sort of reform, if you can call it that. And design 2, not, again, he's very similar to Rhino. Not the smoothest looking outfit. Cultural impact 2, he has not appeared outside the pages of the comics either. He's been classified by several organizations, security organizations, as a alpha level threat just because of his brutality, lack of empathy, and his ability to communicate with these underwater creatures. Not very easy to negotiate with when he's on one of his rampages. That is Orka. Moving to number 3, we have the genie. Nope, it's not the genie. Just kidding. Warlord KRANG. And interestingly enough, KRANG is also the name of one of the chief Ninja Turtles antagonists. Different person though, of course. His first appearance was way back in July 1963 in the first annual issue of Fantastic Four, so Fantastic Four Annual number 1. He is also from Atlantis and was also created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. 3s across the board for his power scale, except for his design, which he was handed a 2 because he does look a little bit too much like the genie from Aladdin. So Warlord KRANG is one of the most nefarious underwater characters in Marvel. So he was one of Namor's chief military officers, and he started hating the prince once Namor decided that he would marry KRANG's fiancée. And he was pushed to his limit when Prince Namor stopped an invasion of the surface world to save the life of the Invisible Woman, who, of course, Prince Namor was romantically interested in. So Namor stayed on the surface, and KRANG returned to Atlantis, took over Namor's throne by force, and when Namor arrived, he was sent away on a quest to capture the relic Trident of Neptune. And of course, being not a very friendly person, KRANG alienated his people almost right away because he was very tyrannical in his rule. His people revolted once Namor returned to the city and helped Namor kick him out. As a result, KRANG was exiled. Then he went to align himself with such characters as BYRRAH and ATTUMA, who we're going to see in a little bit. He actually has appeared in other media. He appeared in the 60s Marvel Superheroes animated show and the Fantastic Four animated series in the 1990s, and he is also a mini-boss in Marvel Ultimate Alliance as well. He is... It's almost comparable to the dynamic between Superman and Zod in the DC comic universe. in that KRANG is very much a match for Prince Namor, but more military-minded, and so is able to put up quite the fight. For number 2, we go to Todd Arliss, aka Tiger Shark, who is one of the more brutal and nasty villains in the Marvel Universe. He began as an Olympic swimmer, a very successful Olympic swimmer. He set a world record in the 100-meter race, had a bunch of sponsorship contracts, was planning on turning pro, and he ended up jumping overboard to save a drowning man once and injured his spine severely. And that took him down a notch in terms of his swimming ability, so he signed up to take part in some medical tests conducted by Dr. Dorcas, who we already know is not the friendliest person and not the most kind-hearted or benevolent person. And Dr. Dorcas combined Arliss's DNA with the Submariners and also a tiger shark, and this was one of Dr. Dorcas's first experiments on a human, so really morphed Todd's body, elongated his teeth, gave him claws, allowed him to breathe underwater, and also bent his mind quite a bit and turned him into a more of a serial killer wild card than a kind of stuck up but also mostly good swimming athlete. And he escaped the laboratory where he was experimented on, headed into the ocean. Namor had to go after him. They tried to keep him in prison in Atlantis to try to cure his condition. Tiger Shark escaped, and he has joined up on occasion with the Masters of Evil or the Lethal Legion. Anybody that will pay him some money. He's a bit of a mercenary, so he is always willing to make a quick buck no matter how he can, and get back at Prince Namor as much as he can too. He is a boss in Marvel Ultimate Alliance in the Atlantis level, like the other two villains we've mentioned. He's been in 3 Marvel animated TV shows, Avengers Assemble, Avengers United They Stand, and Marvel Disc Wars. He's from Pasadena, California. His first appearance was in the Submariner number 5, 1968, September. His personality, 3s all across the board. He's quite cunning. He has super strength, ability to breathe underwater, very formidable foe. A very interesting history, which is why we gave him a 3 in mythology. Design 3. He's gotten some pretty ugly uniforms over the years, but he's also gotten some pretty cool ones, so we left him at 3 there. Cultural impact 3 due to the video game and TV series appearances. He was created by Roy Thomas and John Buscema. And we get to number 1. Probably one of the more lesser-known number 1s that we're going to see in this series. It is ATTUMA, who is a barbarian-like warlord from under the surface of the ocean. He was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and first appeared in Fantastic Four number 33 in December of 1964. And originally he fought the Fantastic Four and Namor, who had teamed up to defeat his coup attempt. His personality and powers both sitting at 3. Mythology 4, he has been behind a lot of undersea crossovers such as Atlantis Attacks. He played a significant role in Dark Reign and Fear Itself. He is one of those constantly plotting nefarious foes that we see in the in the pages of comics. Design, he's had some pretty clunky designs over the years, but also some pretty cool ones. So he's got a 3 cultural impact, 3 as well. If we ever see Namor in the MCU and he's going to get a solo movie, we're probably going to see ATTUMA as one of the villains. He has a history of having delusions of grandeur, so he believes that he is prophesied to be ruler of Atlantis, And so he keeps trying and trying and trying and trying and trying to get Namor off the throne. Doesn't really work. He has teamed up with Dr. Doom, Tiger Shark, King the Conqueror, Squadron Supreme, a lot of different villains. And he always has one thing on his mind, and that is the throne of Atlantis. He appears as a boss villain in a few video games. Fantastic Four, the PlayStation game from the 90s, Marvel Ultimate Alliance, and Lego Marvel Superheroes 2. He's also an unlockable playable character in that game. He's also been in quite a few animated shows. Marvel Superheroes, again, that one's from the 60s, the 90s Fantastic Four show, Ultimate Spider-Man, Web Warriors, Avengers United They Stand, Fantastic Four, World's Greatest Heroes, and Avengers Assemble. So he's made the rounds. And of course, we do have some other kind of honorable mentions in that they're big villains like Dr. Doom, Puppet Master, Magneto, but they're more focused on other heroes as their arch nemesis. So we're going to wait for those heroes and teams, as it were, to appear, and at that point we will address those villains. So a little bit thinner this week. As you can see, we only have one bobblehead, although there's a really cool Joe Quesada cover up here from Invaders #1, the most recent series. So those are the top 10 villains from Prince Namor's runs in the comics from the 60s, 70s, and pre-Marvel days. Next week we're going to go with Captain America villains, so we're going to have a little more familiarity with some of those guys. Finally, thanks for excusing my voice. I'm actually getting back from having a paralyzed vocal cord. I think it was better the previous 2 weeks, and today it's kind of flaky, so appreciate your patience as far as that's concerned. Thanks for watching. Make sure you follow our channel, and be aware for the next episode of Bring On the Bad Guys, and we will see you next time.